Welcome back to the round trip where we'll unpack the macro and crypto headlines that led to this week's all-time high. I'm John Sienna. Welcome.
I'm Cassidy Huang. Hi, John.
Hey,
So, yeah, so Bitcoin is back at all-time highs this week. It's not all about Bitcoin. Equities are also flying. The US is spending like there's no tomorrow. So crypto is once again sitting in front and center in Washington.
yeah, I saw it past the all-time high like a couple of days ago, and then it just keeps going.
Mhm.
But unlike past rallies, this one seems quite different and it has some different drivers. So let's dive in.
Yeah. So this time is not just the ETF hype or the having cycle. Like last time when Bitcoin hit all-time high, we were still in having cycle, right? But this time is a lot of institutional capital coming in. If you've been tracking guys like Nico on X, he actually had over 250 announcements of companies adding BTC to their treasuries, and that's over around 68,000 Bitcoin purchased. So it's not just retail. A lot of corporations coming in.
Yeah, it seems like the retail selling to companies is kind of like the opposite of traditional commerce.
Hmm.
And just last week alone, there was 54 new entities or new treasury announcements that totaled over 8,000 Bitcoin. And I think the more surprising one was Figma, and they're planning to go public. They announced that they already hold 70 million in Bitcoin ETFs, and they plan to buy 30 million more in Bitcoin. So yeah, quite crazy. You just think of like the traditional design company, which is not a Bitcoin treasury company. They're like, yeah, pretty cutting edge when it comes to like design tech, and then they're getting involved in Bitcoin and hedging their assets. And yeah, this past week's been pretty huge for the Bitcoin ETFs. There's been 1.6 billion in net inflows just for the over the past 4 days, and we'll see what it is today. But I think it's going to be maybe another record or at least a top five inflow day because July 10th was 1.18 billion, and that was the second highest on record.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think the macro backdrop has been the rocket fuel for this rally. Last week, Congress passed the Big Beautiful Bill. So it will have a blowout budget that signals more spending, more debt, and continued erosion of confidence in the US dollar going forward.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Bitcoin believers have always believed, at least since like 10 years ago. They're like, you got to sell your fiat, Gresham's law. You get rid of the bad money first. And this, big beautiful bill, it's just more spending. So what does that mean? More inflation means the devaluing of the dollar. And then what do you do when the dollar is devalued? You buy scarce assets, finite assets like gold, but also Bitcoin, which is the most scarce and most finite because it has a fixed supply. You're not just gonna find a trillion tons of gold on some asteroid and have the new space tech. There's no Bitcoin besides the 21 million.
Hmm. Yeah, so next week, it's going to be the crypto week in the US House of Representatives. They'll be reviewing everything from stablecoin frameworks to market structure. So that will be very interesting.
Yeah, and at the same time, yeah, we're also seeing these equities highs as you mentioned earlier. The Nasdaq and S&P have hit all-time highs, and the Dow is not far behind. It's like maybe a couple hundred points. So I think across the board, the market's risk on.
Hmm. Yeah, what's also interesting is the macro risks that appear to be easing. Well, at least for now, the Israel-Gaza conflict may be winding down. There's no regime upheaval in Iran, and inflation prints have been surprisingly tame in both the US and EU so far.
Yeah, so like right now in this moment, we have the macros that's super supportive, institutions that are just, flooding in, and then the dollar being questioned again. If you remember back in May, Moody's actually downgraded US debt,
Mhm.
and even regulators are taking crypto more seriously. So, for example, the US Senate just confirmed Jonathan Gould. He was actually a former Bitfury executive, one of like the larger miner and hardware providers. as the new head of the Office of Comptroller of the Currency. So it's signaling more, crypto-friendly stance in Washington, especially from a regulatory perspective.
Hmm. Well, let's round things out with a few questions to spark some deeper thinking for us and also for our listeners. So my first question would be, is the rally sustainable, or are we seeing another speculative cycle?
Yeah, ironically, I actually think it's different this time. So you have all these corporate balance sheets, and the regulatory momentum behind it is just like, yeah, unsurpassed. Nothing's like it before. Um, there might be some pullbacks, of course, that's just natural market. But the question is like whether the floor is the now supported by institutions, like are they buyers automatically at 100K? And I guess the age-old question is like, is this the last time we'll see it below X price?
Hmm.
Yeah, so what do you think? Like with Figma buying and holding Bitcoin, like it's a little out of the ordinary, or do you think there's more traditional companies that are going to do this?
Yeah, so I think Figma's news actually shocked me this week. Their latest disclosure actually represents around 5% of its balance sheet. I think the key motivations for companies like Figma that are buying Bitcoin and holding Bitcoin is definitely for number one, diversification, and also two, potential for appreciation in value, and then maybe three, the regulatory clarity. That's more on the opposite side now. A lot of companies they have positive uh, image for holding Bitcoin, and also maybe, and lastly, maybe for brand differentiation. Early adopters like MicroStrategy, Tesla, and now Figma, they have positioned themselves as a forward-thinking companies. Um, Sometimes this will attract more investors. But is Bitcoin right for every company? I would say not necessary. Well, the decision will depend on their risk tolerance because Bitcoin is, well, it's been performing pretty well lately, but it's still a pretty volatile asset. And yeah, the overall strategic goals for the company will matter. So corporate holding Bitcoins is not going to be it's a good diversification, but it's not a one size fits all solution, I would say.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
agree. And I also think that, 5% is actually what Larry Fink recommends people hold in their portfolio. So it's a good number. It's not like too extreme. I think investors will also, not take it like too seriously, like in like a scary sense, and like write the company out because it's a volatile asset. 5% is definitely safe for, yeah, how much cash they have on hand.
yeah, yeah. But how does Bitcoin behave now if it trades like a risk on assets alongside all these tech stocks? What do you think about?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is still like a hybrid. You definitely see it taking off during these risk on cycles, but it also has like some gold-like properties where, when things get a little weary, and there's a moment of crisis, like this recent trade war, yeah, Bitcoin kind of held its ground. It did dip, but it wasn't that significant, I think, and especially compared to like if this were, 4 years ago, like Bitcoin would have tanked. I mean, we also like what happened with um, Bitcoin when the COVID crisis happened. It
Yeah.
went down pretty hard, and then I think the real risk is the dollar now. I think that's exemplified by all these, companies holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet when they could be holding treasuries. The 5% is not that attractive when you think the risk of inflation is a lot higher. So I guess the real question is like, what can derail this rally?
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely a hawkish surprise from the Fed. Yeah, which we do not want to see. Maybe a regulatory crackdown or geopolitical black swan. Economic slowdown, market corrections, liquidity shocks. These could all be the main threats that could derail the rally. But I think a current situation that we're looking at right now, none of these are imminent at this moment. So I think that's why the capital are continue flowing in. Jamie Dimon, the JP Morgan CEO, actually did say that there's a 40 to 50% chance of the Fed that could actually raise rate. So we will
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
Yeah. He said that the markets are pricing around like 20%.
Mhm.
Um, and it does seem like, times are good right now. But that's always like when people start piling on the trades because I mean, if things look good, why not put a little risk on? But you never know what's around the corner. I mean, the world is a volatile place, as we've seen in the last few months. But yeah, if things continue looking good, I think this rally will just continue. Uh, and I think, yeah, maybe next week we'll have continued all-time highs. And I think today might be a big inflow for the ETFs after we just saw like this
Mhm.
extreme kind of price volatility overnight. And yeah, thanks for joining us. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Round Trip. Bitcoin's making history again. And but the context this time is a little different. It's brand new. So whether you're a crypto OG or you're just waking up to the digital asset era, the next few months they're going to be quite wild.